Howdy, and welcome to LeeReads, where I talk about the books I've been reading and enjoying lately. This video is going to be something slightly different. I was looking around on the subreddit R Fantasy a couple of days ago, and I saw that they are doing an R Fantasy Bingo, and it runs from April of this year through the end of March next year. They create a bingo card with various prompts on it, and you go in and you figure out what books that you're going to read for that prompt, and the goal is to completely fill it out by next year. I thought it could be a fun take on somewhat of a year-long TBR that is science fiction, fantasy, horror focused, but the prompts are designed to push you a little bit outside your comfort zones and check out new things. You're allowed to reread only one book. So I spent some time thinking, and I thought that I would share that with you today, but also I need a little bit of help coming up with ideas for some of the prompts. So I'm going to share the bingo card and quickly go through what I've selected. I'm not going to overly describe each book because I think that would take too long. Of course, after I read it, I will discuss it in the next reading wrap up that I do. I'm also using this as an excuse to try to help me read the books that I have on my bookshelves. The first prompt is title with a title. Read a book in which the novel title contains a job title, military title, or title of nobility such as locksmith, lieutenant, or lord. Hard mode is not a title of royalty. So I found that quite hard. I would like to do hard mode if I can. But of course, so many book titles have royalty in the title. I came across a book I'd never heard of before, and yet it apparently is this foundational piece of work called The King of Elfland's Daughter, which was written back in the 1800s. That might be an interesting one to pick, but also I did just receive in my fairy loot box The Foxglove King by Hannah Witten, which is an adult fantasy that would qualify. But let me know if you can think of any other books with a title within a title that's not nobility or royalty so that I can go for that hard mode. Next is superheroes. Story focuses on superpowered individuals, heroes and villains and capes. Hard mode is not related to DC or Marvel. For this one, I think Vicious by V.E. Schwab. It's about people trying to get superpowers by doing, I think, dastardly things. Read a book from the bottom of your TBR. I'm going to go with Bitter Twins by Jen Williams, Book 2, In the Winnowing Flame. I really want to read it. I just need to stop getting distracted by other things. Magical realism or literary fantasy, going the literary fantasy route, Wizard of Earthsea, which is also in my exploding TBR. Young adult, hard mode, published within the last 5 years. That's pretty easy. I frequently read young adult, but one book I'm really looking forward to is the sequel to This Vicious Grace, which is called This Cursed Light, that comes out, I think, later this year or early 2024. All right, second row across mundane jobs. This one was really hard. The protagonist has a commonplace job that can be found in the real world, so no princes or monster hunters. We are excluding soldiers, as they are already extremely prominent in science fiction fantasy. Hard mode does not take place on Earth. I think that Paladin's Grace would have been perfect because Grace is a perfumer, but unfortunately I didn't want to use a reread for that. So in Googling, I discovered a book called Hinch, which is about, I think, the accountant of a bunch of villains, and that sounded really fun to me, so I think I'll be going with Hinch. But I would like to do hard mode, so not set on Earth, if you have any ideas. Next is published in the aughts. Read a book that was published between year 2000 and 2009. I recently picked up a couple books at the library book sale. Green Rider. I was really intrigued by this old school cover. It was published in 2000. Angels and Demons. The story must feature angels and demons. Hard mode is the protagonist is the angel or the demon. That is going to be Witch King by Martha Wells, which comes out in May, but I have an advanced copy that I've already started. 5 science fiction fantasy short stories. Any science fiction fantasy short story, as long as there are 5 of them. Hard mode is to read an entire anthology. So I thought it would be a good opportunity to read this Star Wars anthology from a certain point of view, which is 40 stories celebrating 40 years of Star Wars, written by a variety of authors. I'll try to read the whole thing, but I at least will read 5. The next one's really hard for me. It's horror, so read a horror novel. and hard mode is not Stephen King or H.P. Lovecraft. I'm going to read a horror novel by T. Kingfisher because aside from writing fantasy, romantic fantasy, she writes horror, and I've not checked any of it out. I think I'm going to go with What Moves the Dead, but I haven't totally picked yet. Third row across is self-published or indie author. If it has been picked up by a publisher, it only counts if you read it when it was still self-published. I picked Legacy of the Brightwash. I've heard a lot of good things about this one, and I already have it on Kindle. Read a book set in the Middle East or in an analogous setting that is based on real-world Middle Eastern settings, myth, and culture. Hard mode is the author is of Middle Eastern heritage. So I was thinking The Adventures of Amina al-Sarafi, which I have actually just read this month. Or I also have Daughters of Istihar. Published in 2023, Thornhedge by T. Kingfisher. Really excited for that one. It's coming out later this year. The author is a person of color. Hard mode. Novel takes place in a futuristic sci-fi world. I picked up The Final Strife. Book club or read-along book. One of the options that you can use is from our Fantasy's various book clubs that they have going on. They have a classics book club, and one of their selections is Frankenstein, so I will be reading Frankenstein. This is actually going to be my reread. I read it in high school, and I think I would have probably much more appreciation for it now, so I really want to reread this one. The next one is novella. The hard mode is not one published by Tor.com. Disaster. The books are all falling. I have the short story collection for the Skyward series, which is called Skyward Flight, and I still need to read the last novella in here, which is called Evershore, so that's going to be my novella selection, and then I'll be caught up with that series. Mythical beasts. Read a book that prominently features at least one mythical beast, meaning a creature that doesn't exist in reality. Hard mode is no dragons or dragon-like creature. The book that I could think of was His Majesty's Dragon, especially because I own it and I need to read it, but I would love some suggestions for mythical beasts that aren't dragons so that I can go for that hard mode. Elemental magic. Read a book that has elemental magic. The primary magic is dealing with the classical elements earth, wind, air, water, and fire. Hard mode is not Shades of Magic or Codex Alera. However, I have Furies of Calderon, which is the first book in Codex Alera by Jim Butcher, on audiobook, and I want to read that one, so I think I'll be selecting that one. Myths and retellings. Read a book that is based on myth or pre-existing story. Hard mode is not Greek or Roman mythology, and I'm going to pick Shield Maiden. The last row. Queer norm setting. Books set in a world where queerness is normalized, accepted, and prevalent within communities. Hard mode is not a futuristic setting. I'm going with Ocean's Echo, which doesn't qualify for hard mode, so I would love your suggestions for this category as well. Druids, a book that heavily features druids. Hard mode is not The Iron Druid Chronicles by Kevin Hearn. I'm going to go with The Crystal Cave by Mary Stewart, which is an Arthurian retelling focusing on Merlin, so that's the druid aspect. I just realized that I skipped a tile. Coastal or island setting. The story features a major setting that is near or surrounded by the sea. Hard mode is the book also features seafaring. So I really hope that this one qualifies, and I think it should. The Last Kingdom by Bernard Cromwell. Uhtred, Son of Uhtred, Viking novel, should qualify. Featuring robots. The novel features a robot. Hard mode is that the main character is a robot. Come on. System Collapse by Martha Wells, the Murderbot novel that's coming out this year. Not hard mode, super easy, gonna read it. Sequel, read a book that is a sequel to another science fiction fantasy book. Hard mode is book 3 or more in the series. This is another one that's been on my list for a while. I'm gonna read Child of Flame, which is book 4 in The Crown of Stars by Kate Elliott. Those are my ideas for what I would like to do for the Fantasy Bingo. I will include all of the information about how to play along in the description box below. I hope that you participate. Please let me know your suggestions, books I should maybe swap out because this isn't set in stone, and I'd love to know what you might pick for a certain category in addition to what I already picked. Again, this is running from this month through the end of March. Lots of time to read this, and I just thought it sounded like a fun way to set a year-long TBR, so to speak, and push my boundaries a little bit. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the slightly different style of video. As always, don't forget to support your local library. Thanks. Bye.